Here! Alright, welcome to POC LLAB. Today we will have guest speaker, Brigadier General Martemucci, former Det 720 alumni, speaking for us. Can we get a round of applause?
Hey, thank you very much, and thanks to all of you for coming and spending time. I brought some show and tell arts and crafts, that's why the bag. The idea here, first of all, I can't tell you how thrilled I am to be back. This is, of all the cool things I've gotten to do, this is probably right up there at the top. And I was telling Rebecca, my wife, I can officially retire now. That I've come back, kind of made this thing full circle. This is just a conversation starter, an opportunity to maybe tell some stories. I stole this idea, this mentoring Jeopardy thing, from probably one of the finest leaders that I've ever worked for, General Dave Goldfein, former Chief Staff of the Air Force. He was the Combined Force Air Component Commander at LLAB Air Base, where I worked for him for a year. And he was a master storyteller, a fantastic mentor, and he did it this way. He had this sort of mentoring Jeopardy, and every one of these is just a short little story, something that happened to me. I stole the idea from General Goldfein, but not his stories. These are all mine. So we can do this a couple different ways. Probably the easiest is if something up here grabs your eye, feel free to shout one out. I'll tell the story. We can talk about it. Like I said, every one of them has a bit of a leadership lesson, something that happened either to me directly, either as a young lieutenant, a captain, or as recently as just as a wing commander colonel not too long ago. So I thought we'd do that, and then if you have questions, anything specific on your mind about either the big Air Force, the intelligence or cyberspace operational career fields, about life on active duty, we can talk about anything, whatever you're interested in. But because it's easy to shout out something, does anybody want to, anything grab anybody's eye?
Intel Career Path Secret.
Okay, so that's an interesting one, because I'll give you the bottom line up front. There is no path. That's the secret. And that applies, honestly, to just about any job that you're going to have, or any AFSC or career field. This story came as a young captain. I was a mid-level captain. I went back down to Goodfellow Air Force Base for what they called, at the time, the Intel Master Skills Course. Now they call it ISR 300. And most of you will go through a series of professional development courses in your respective AFSCs. Sometimes they're called top-off courses. In this case, it was a kind of a mid-career course for Intel officers, and they brought us all back to Goodfellow, and we'd sit in these chairs, and for about a week or two, they would parade a whole bunch of senior leaders before us, and they would tell us what we're supposed to do, right? The state of the Air Force, the state of the career field, and they would all tell you, here's what you need to do. You need to do this, then this, then this. But the thing is, they gave us their bios beforehand, and I would sit in that chair, and I would look at their biography, and I'd see their career trajectory and their path. And what they were telling us very rarely matched what they actually did on their biography. And that's where I learned and I realized that there is no one right path. There is no magic. You must do this job, then this job, then this job to be successful. The Intel Career Path secret is that there is no one path. There is no secret. The real message there is bloom where you're planted. Truly, you're going to end up getting recognized for what you do, not the job you're in. And the example I give as an Intel professional, the only intelligence 4-star general we've ever had in our United States Air Force. One each General Michael Hayden. You know, as an Intel guy, as a non-rated operator, not a whole lot of senior positions, right? Very rarely will you see a 4-star general that's not rated. That's changing now in our Air Force for good, but back in the day it wasn't the case. And the only Intel 4-star general we ever had, General Hayden, if you look at his career path, it was all the things you weren't supposed to do. It was all the off-the-reservation jobs. He was, as a young company grader, he was an ROTC instructor. He was a defense attaché, twice, I think, an assistant attaché. In our career field, in the Intel career field, the message normally is, okay, you gotta do this operational job, and this deployed job, and this operational job, and those jobs were seen as sort of off the reservation. Yet there he was, a 4-star general. Why? because in every job he did it really, really well, and he was recognized. He was a ROTC instructor, yes, and he was the best ROTC instructor in the region. And when he was a defense attaché, he was the best attaché, and it was recorded on his records. That's why he got promoted. He bloomed where he planted. So don't get disheartened, don't get discouraged when you get an assignment that's, oh my goodness, that's kind of a non-standard one, not in my career field. Because there is no path. That's the secret. Good one. Anyone else? Yeah.
Sir, the one that says you don't say sir enough.
Yeah. This is a good one. This is where First Lieutenant Martemucci got chewed out big time by a crusty, scary Army colonel who ended up being perhaps the greatest boss, one of the greatest bosses I've ever had, who became a lifelong mentor and friend until he passed from cancer years ago. The story there, I was a young first lieutenant as a 5th person on a 5-person military liaison team in the Czech Republic. Prague, in fact. Glorious TDY. I don't dare call it a deployment because it wasn't exactly combat conditions. But way back when, we were getting the Czechs ready for NATO, right? Back when NATO was expanding, in 1997 timeframe, the Czechs, the Slovaks, the Hungarians, the Poles, we were bringing them into NATO. And so we had these things in US EUCOM, European Command, called military liaison teams. And I was part of a team of 5 people. It was an Army colonel, a Marine gunnery sergeant, an Army lieutenant colonel, me, and I think another Army captain. Anyway, our whole job was to get the Czechs ready for NATO by organizing contact team events, military to military. But I was there about 4 or 5 days. Got picked up at the airport, began working with the team. It was a very small team, a little joint team. I was working directly for this Army colonel. And the other part of the story is that I came from Edwards Air Force Base, where I was a young lieutenant working for a civilian. And it was not exactly the most strict or rigorous of military environments. The Air Force Flight Test Center at Edwards. Great job, but I did not fit the mold that this Army colonel expected of a young Air Force lieutenant. And so on about day 4, he marched me into his office, made me report in, had me standing at attention in front of his big oak desk there, and proceeded to tear me apart. Professionally, but very, very sternly, and gave me very clear guidance. Lieutenant, I expect you to treat me the way a 30-year colonel of the United States Army ought to be treated. I expect you to say sir at the beginning and the end of every sentence. I expect you to answer when asked, but otherwise, I'll take your input when I need it, etc., etc. I walked out of that office completely deflated. I was like, oh my God, I suck. I'm the worst lieutenant in the United States Air Force. I'm an embarrassment to my service. This colonel thinks I am worthless. But I'll tell you what, that 6 months was the greatest 6 months of my young officer time. Because once Colonel Tom Hayes, I will never forget his name, set his expectations for me, once he told me what he expected of me, it was easy. I sir sandwiched the heck out of that thing. I was yes sir all the time. And over those 6 months, that relationship changed from a very directive, very one-directional, to a very collegial, very team-driven relationship. Once I knew the expectations of my boss, who gave me clear guidance, and I delivered, he began to see that, okay, this guy can be taught. And I'll tell you, after those 6 months, Colonel Tom Hayes kept track of me, kept in contact with me. He visited me when I went down to Airborne School at Fort Benning, Georgia. He and his wife drove 6 hours to come to my graduation. I got Christmas cards from him every year after that. And until he passed from cancer, years after he retired, he still checked up on me. I still consider him a mentor and one of the best bosses I ever had. That first morning, that first week, when I stood in front of his desk, ladies and gentlemen, it sucked. I'd never been yelled at before. I'd never been told I wasn't awesome before, right? We have a culture of patting people on the head, telling them they're doing great. That's the first person who actually told me, A, that what he expected of me, and B, that I wasn't delivering. But that was super, super powerful. Because once I knew, easy peasy, I can do that. So, you don't say sir enough. I learned my lesson, and it was awesome after that. Any others? All right, we'll go back there and then over here. Sir.
The 3 items on my desk.
Aha, okay, this is a show and tell one, and what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna pass these 3 items around. We're gonna pass them around, and then we're gonna come back to that one. But thank you for asking this one relatively early. Because I need to be able to get you all to figure this out. So this is all interactive here. All right, so we're gonna start them like this. Pass them around, and as we tell some stories, take a look at these, see if anybody can figure out what those are, and once they make themselves the way back around the room, maybe we'll end with that one, because that's a great one. Okay, you have it.
Sir, can we do the cigars on the USS Nimitz?
Yeah. All right. I mentioned General Dave Goldfein, CFAC, Combined Force Air Component Commander. He was a 3-star general. I was a young colonel. Actually, I was a lieutenant colonel, frock to colonel, at LUD Air Base. At the same time that Colonel Havard was downrange with me in a slightly more austere, slightly a little bit more forward location, a couple 100 miles south. But I spent a year working directly for General Goldfein, and it was a master class in leadership. And by the way, I forgot to mention, you notice I have these sort of in bins: show you care, encourage innovation, recognize your power, recognize your blind spots, and have a story. Those are not things that just brigadier generals and colonels should have. You all, as first-line supervisory leaders of airmen, need to begin building those things. You can already start having stories. You can already start encouraging innovation, and we're going to talk about how. But showing you care is a critical one, and it doesn't have to be, hey, I care, this is what I'm going to do for you, I'm going to tell you how I'm going to do it. Sometimes it just happens and you don't realize until years later. And that's what happened to me on that one. Cigars on the Nimitz. I was the ISRD chief, the Intelligence, Surveillance, and Reconnaissance Division chief, basically the chief of intelligence working for General Goldfein. And we were a relatively new class. Well, I say class because we all kind of show up for a 1-year tour, and all of the senior leaders, the division level leadership kind of shows up at the same time. We rotate in, we rotate out. So it was a handful of colonels, and then this 3-star. And the A2, the chief of intel and the chief of ops were kind of primary staff functions. And I had never worked with the director of operations that we just met when we showed up, nor had I worked for General Goldfein. So about a week or 2 into the job, maybe a little longer than that, General Goldfein said, Bluto, Colonel Craig Baker, and I, he said, you're coming with me. We're going out to visit a buddy of mine, Admiral Manazier on the USS Nimitz. So the USS Nimitz Carrier Strike Group was conducting operations in the Arabian Gulf. We were there at Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar, running air operations for Operation Inherent Resolve and Operation Enduring Freedom in Afghanistan. So we had all the air operations in the Middle East. And he was going out to visit his friend and classmate from the academy days, who happened to be the Carrier Strike Group commander, doing all the naval operations in the Arabian Gulf. So we got on a C2 and did the whole cat and trap thing and landed on the aircraft carrier, got the standard dog and pony show, toured, had a nice dinner, etc. And then General Goldfein, this 3-star general, and Admiral Matazier, 2-star general, were going up onto the crow's nest. You know, on an aircraft carrier, there's the center island, and there's what they call the crow's nest, or vulture's row. It's a place where you can sit out there and watch flight operations. And he drug us along, me and Bluto Baker. And the 2 of these 30-plus year seasoned veterans who had a lifetime's worth of combat experience, one who had been shot down in Bosnia, General Goldfein, and one who had equally harrowing combat experience, busted out some cigars and just talked. And it wasn't just them, they kept us around. And we just sat there and listened. He, General Goldfein, did not have to take Colonel Baker and I out there to that aircraft carrier. He did not have to let us come and hang out. He did not have to deliberately keep us within earshot as he engaged with his friend as they strategized over how they were going to manage combined air operations over the Middle East. But he did. And he did it because he knew that he had to build a team. And he knew that Colonel Baker and I were going to spend the next year together running air operations, managing 2 air wars. And he knew we needed a bond. And he needed to know that we could trust each other and that he could trust us. And so taking us along, something as simple as, yeah, there's 2 empty seats on this airplane, I'm gonna take these 2 with us, created an opportunity, a bonding experience, a shared experience, that when we came back to Al Udeid, we were no longer the them, we were the us. We just went out into the Arabian Gulf onto an aircraft carrier and watched Iranian fast attack craft hassling us, and we watched flight operations, right? And we got to do the whole catapult thing. That shared, that bonded experience was something that we didn't realize at the time, but was a deliberate act of mentorship. And from that, my lesson was, I travel a lot. Sometimes there's empty seats on airplanes. Sometimes I got money in my budget to take an airman along, and I do, because General Goldfein took me along. So I have, when I was a wing commander, a Take an Airman TDY program. I traveled a lot when I was a 70th Wing Commander, about 2 to 3 weeks out of the month. And I built into my budget travel money to take airmen with me. Because sometimes people work in jobs that have no idea how what they do affects the rest of the mission. Sometimes people just need to know how they fit into the big machine. So this Take an Airman TDY program, and now my Take an Analyst TDY program that I had, because I have a lot of civilian analysts at Fort Meade in Cyber Command who've never been to another military installation or never been to another part of the mission. That's an outgrowth of the lesson I learned by having cigars on the USS Nimitz with General Goldfein. Another one? Sir?
Sir, coefficient of the defect count.
Okay, yeah. So, you've heard about innovation, right? Innovation's a big buzzword. There's a lot of people in the US government, US military, talking about innovation. There's innovation centers, there's innovation labs. A lot of people are doing what I call innovation theater. You build a big fancy office with beanbag chairs, and you got brightly colored walls, maybe a popcorn machine, and you let your people wear hoodies, or that's innovation. I would offer that sometimes innovation is simply asking the big 3 questions and empowering your airmen to ask the big 3 questions. Why, why not, and what if? Why do we do things this way? Why can't we do them like this? What if we did ... This is a little bit of a teaser part of my talk on Saturday night, so I'm not going to get too far into the why not, what if. But the goldfish was my attempt when I was a wing commander a few years ago to encourage a culture of innovation. Because I'm proud to say that as airmen, we are the most innovative service. We are, in some ways, already imbuing this sort of culture of heretical questioning. That's okay, that's good, that's healthy. But it doesn't have to be big, grand stuff. It could just be simply asking the question. So this story starts with young Captain Martemucci at Denver Air Force Base going TDY to Fort Meade, where I got to do some cool things, but I was just there TDY, but I ate in the DFAC at Fort Meade, which, for those who don't know, Fort Meade is an Army installation, but there's an Air Force wing on that installation, and it runs a dining facility for the airmen on that wing, on that base, and there's 6,000. I ate in that DFAC, and there was a fountain in the middle of it, typical 60s, 70s style DFAC, chairs everywhere, and a little square fountain in the middle, bubbling, a little water. That's kind of cool. There's no fish in there. It'd be kind of cool if there were fish. Why are there no fish in this fountain? Fountains need fish, right? We've all been to Chinese restaurants, or they got goldfish. But I didn't ask it out loud. I'm just a captain, not TDY. Then I came back to Fort Meade as a lieutenant colonel, as a squadron commander. This time, I had an office right next to that DFAC, and I ate in that DFAC all the time. But, as you will find in your Air Force lives, we have unique relationships in the joint world. The 70th Wing, I was a tenant. I was a squadron commander, but I was a tenant of the 70th Wing. My actual parent wing was down in Texas. So now I'm a squadron commander, lieutenant colonel, but it's not my DFAC, not my fountain. But I still ate there, and there were still no fish. And it kind of bugged me. But now I'm not gonna ask out loud because it's not my wing. Fast forward 7, 8, 10 years, now I come back to the 70th ISR wing as the wing commander. Now, I own those 6,000 people. I own that DFAC. It's my dining facility. Now I ask the question out loud. Hey guys, for 20 years I've been eating in that DFAC off and on in my Air Force career. Why are there no goldfish? I would like goldfish in the fountain of my DFAC. I think it would raise the morale of our airmen. So because I'm the wing commander now, they gotta find out. They gotta actually go and do the homework. Well, no kidding, they did. And I kid you not, folks, this is what the team came back to me with. Sir, here's the deal. There used to be goldfish in that fountain back in like the 70s. It's been around a long time. There used to be goldfish in that fountain, but here's what we found out. Because we are on an Army installation, the U.S. Army came in and did a health and whatever safety inspections. And here in the table and rule of U.S. Army regulations, it says, I'm not making this up, any animals on the Army installation must be checked by a veterinarian every year. And because the goldfish were not ever able to be checked by veterinarians and they were animals on the installation, the Army said we had to remove them. And I said, don't you think maybe they were talking about canines, working dogs, right? Maybe even mules, because that's probably when this regulation was written, right? Because mules that carry the artillery, yes, they need veterinary checks, they're a piece of military equipment, but I'm pretty sure they didn't mean, yeah, but the rule, sir, the rule, the table and rule, there it is, chapter whatever, Army veterinary regulations, no animals in the deep. So that's when I, empowered by my Chief of Staff of the Air Force, who said, you wing commanders, I'm going to trust you to be bold, to innovate. Go ahead, right? Accept risk, wing commanders. And so I said, what if, to my team, what if we put goldfish in that fountain? Why can't I? And so I had an innovation conference where we were talking about all kinds of things, and that morning before I was doing opening comments at this conference, I ran over to the pet store, and I bought a plastic bag of about 6 50-cent feeder goldfish, pond common. And I had my big impassioned plea at the podium, and then at the end of this I said, I'm putting my money where my mouth is. I'm telling you I would go forth and innovate. I've been told I can't, and I'm going to go out right after this, and I'm going to put these goldfish in that fountain, and if they fire me, so be it. We're doing it. So I did. I put the goldfish in a fountain. Guess what? I didn't get fired. We didn't cause World War III. And about 10 years later, I'm not kidding, because I'm still on that Air Force base, or on that Army base, in that Air Force installation. Those same goldfish are now this big. The airmen feed them everything they're not supposed to feed them. They're enormous, and they're loving life, and they all have names. They're all named after group commanders or squadron commanders in that way. And they're still there as a testament to innovation. Because sometimes it's just the little things. Why does the door swing this way? Why can't I fix it so it swings that way so it's easier to get in and out? Why does the checklist say this for the left hatch operating mechanism? Well, here's why. Okay, but what if we change it? Airmen ask those questions. Airmen ask why not, what if. Airmen accept risk properly, etc. But that's how we innovate, that's how we change. So that's the goldfish story. I took way too long on that one.
Follow up on that question. So, I mean, innovation doesn't have to be at the wing commander level. So do you ever regret not asking that question the first time you visited that base?
I do. I do. Realistically, if I were the wing commander and somebody came TDY, some lieutenant, one of you, next year, came and I found out that you'd asked that question, why are there no goldfish? I would like to think that I, as a wing commander, 20 years ago now, would have said, that's a damn good question. I don't know why there are no goldfish, right? And that's, so yes, and that's part of this, right? If I encourage innovation for all of my airmen, and most importantly for my youngest and newest, and by airmen I'm talking about the civilians who work for me, contractors, that's a little fuzzy there, but civilians, uniformed military. Sometimes the fresh set of eyes the new look, the outside perspective is exactly what you need. You have heard all, the parable of the emperor has no clothes and all that good stuff. Like, sometimes that's what it takes, is somebody who just got there go, whoa, why do we do that? So, because we've always done it that way. Oh, really? If I can't answer your question with exactly why we can or cannot do something, then I do, as a leader, need to ask myself whether it should continue or not. So yes, I do regret it. So don't regret it when you get out there. Ask the questions. Legally, morally, ethically, through the chain of command, but ask. All right, what else? Sir?
Sir, can we do wing commander playing a prisoner?
So this is one of the stories, actually, that only one of the few that hasn't happened to me, but it's a great, great object lesson. This was Shaw Air Force Base. The wing commander at Shaw Air Force Base, an F-16 base, I won't name the commander or the time frame, so you can't go and figure out who it was. He had a reputation for being pretty strong-willed and somewhat believing in his own way. But he was driving in his car one day with his senior enlisted leader, his chief, and I hope to goodness that as part of your training you have had beaten into your heads the power of the officer enlisted leadership team and the reliance on those incredible senior NCOs and NCOs that are going to save your bacon. Because leadership is not a unitary thing, right? Leadership is a team sport. And a command team is made up of a commander, a superintendent, or senior enlisted leader, a DO, maybe a few others. But if that's not working, the commander's not listening to her soup, or her soup is not speaking truth to power to her commander, no bueno. This case, Shaw Air Force Base, wing commander, superintendent, command chief, sitting in the seat next to him. He's driving along. Back then they had white top cars, right? Blue, he was super powerful. He sees an airman on the median picking up trash. He's like, oh, that's great, look at that. That's initiative. That's an airman doing good things, cleaning up. I'm gonna pull over and pat that young man on the head, give him a coin. Chief grabs the boss. Hey boss, hold on a second. Before you do that, no, I got this. I'm gonna put the car apart. I'm gonna be hero wing commander. I'm gonna recognize this great airman. Sir, hold on a second. Let me give you, I got it, I'll be right back. Gets out of the car. Young man, I'm so proud of you. Thank you for what you're doing for our Air Force. This is awesome. That's initiative. Thanks for cleaning up the trash. Here's a coin. Shake hand. Hop back in the car. Put it in drive. Command chief looks over at his boss. Sir, you just coined a prisoner. That man is doing hard duty labor while he's in custody because he did something really, really bad. You just coined a bad person. They're going to be out of our Air Force as soon as they work through the legal system. The lesson there, don't believe your own myth. Never think you're the most important person in the room. Always be willing to listen to those that are there to speak wise counsel. If you don't have that leadership team, build one. If you begin to think that you are the most important person in the room, that you've learned it all, that you know it all, that's exactly when you need to take a couple humble pills and look around and go, who can speak some truth to power to me? Because you don't want to be that wing commander who goes around giving your command coins to prisoners. Okay, I think I saw a hand over here somewhere, maybe not. Who else has got one? Yeah.
So can you talk about mortars and marriage?
That's one of my favorites because there's so many lessons wrapped up into this one. I was a major, Rescue Wing IN at Moody Air Force Base, 347th Rescue Wing. I pulled a deployment with the HA-60Gs at Balad Air Base, and we were there in 2005-06 time frame. Pretty regular inbound mortar rocket attacks from the perimeter of the base. Thankfully, no casualties in terms of deaths, but a good bit of damage because these things were indiscriminate, they weren't terribly accurate, and we would, on a routine basis, get incoming rounds from the fields around the airbase. And so the OSI, any people who want to go do OSI, Office of Special Investigations, anybody interested in that career? But it's a fascinating one. Obviously law enforcement investigations here at home, but forward, they play a very important role in force protection and kind of human intelligence. And the OSI team was out and about, and they came back and told me this story. And together we worked this out and put it all together, and I took some real big object lessons from it. So here's how it goes. Balad Air Base, 2005, a whole bunch of inbound rocket, and mostly mortars. And what would happen is these young Iraqi men would, in the middle of the night, take a bunch of tubes, very inaccurate, very kind of homemade, stick them in the dirt, put a berm up, aim it about right, light the thing, mortars would come in. This happened over and over and over and over again. So the Air Force spent dozens, if not hundreds of millions, on very technical solutions to solve this problem. One of them was the CRAM, the Counter Rocket Artillery and Mortar System. 4-barrel, 20-millimeter cannon, looks like an R2-D2 kind of thing with a little millimeter wave radar. 70% of the time, it can hit 50% of whatever's coming in. We paid for, a really, it's a decent system, it's not perfect, but it'll hit everything from, this radar's incredible. It can pick out a softball at 10 miles. It can hit a very small object to include very, very unfortunate birds, and everything else when it's turned on. And the whole idea was we'd ring the base with these CRAM systems, and it was going to stop the inbound mortars or rockets from hitting. And the OSI team spent time building relationships with the local villagers in the town just outside of Balad, and they had tea with one of the sheikhs, and he said, "You Americans, you don't get it. You're spending all this money on these fancy systems, and you're spending all this time in these up-armored vehicles driving around trying to figure out how to stop these young men from mortaring you. And you're missing the big picture. Here's why they're doing it. You came here. We actually were happy you came here. You set up this huge big base. We were all excited because we thought we were going to get jobs on your base. Yet you bring in all these third country nationals, contractors, to work your gate security, to work in your DFACs. No goldfish. All the young men in the town right outside of Balad want only one thing. They want a young lady to spend the rest of their life with. You can't do that unless you get married. You can't get married unless you have a job. There are no jobs around here. This country is torn apart. So somebody, ISIS, who comes by and goes, I'll give you $50 to put these tubes out tomorrow night, point them there, and fire it at the Americans. All right, got nothing else to do. I got no hope. I got no job. I got no prospects of getting married, starting a family. $50 is $50. He said, you're missing the point. You just spent a couple $100 million on this fancy CRAM system that's going to hit 50% of them 70% of the time, when all you had to do was give these guys jobs, and they would be the biggest defenders of your base. They wouldn't let anything happen to you because they'd have cash, they'd have a wife, they'd have kids. And the lesson there is, as an intelligence professional, very often I spend a lot of time trying to make sure that I eliminate cognitive bias in my analysis and eliminate all of the various biases. But the most basic cognitive bias is cultural, right? As Americans, we apply technological solutions to human problems. Now, I'm not suggesting that simply giving every Iraqi a job, or even buying for far cheaper than it costs to buy the CRAMs, we could have bought all the farmland within 20 miles, given every Iraqi townsperson $10,000. I'm not suggesting that that's the solution. What I'm saying is that we apply technological solutions to what are very often human problems. Now, it doesn't mean we shouldn't do that, but we have to think about it from a different perspective. And as you go out into the world, you can't not be an American. You need to be an American. But you need to recognize that you think like an American and others think like whoever they are. And so understanding cultural differences, understanding socioeconomics and geopolitics is just as important as understanding the max effective range of a CRAM or the throw weight of a GBU-12 or anything else. So mortars and marriage, they are in fact related.
Could you do how do you ask, how are you doing?
Sure. This one's, I'm originally from Brooklyn. I left at a pretty young age, but you know, in New York, how you doing is both a call and a response. It's an acknowledgement, it's a hello. How you doing? How you doing? How you doing? Nobody expects the answer. Hey, how you doing? How you doing? You are the most important and will be the day you step onto your first base. You're the most important level of leadership in our United States Air Force, because you have direct touch maintenance of the most important element of our Air Force, which is our airmen. Now, there's another related story to this, which I'll try to weave into it. But how do you ask, how are you doing, is just that. When I say, hey, how you doing? Do I wait the 2 count, the 3 count, to see if you're actually going to give me an answer? No, really, I mean it. How are you? You know? And then actually listening when you get it. Because what you'll get right away is, oh, I'm fine, sir, it's all good, everything's good. Really? How are you? Well, actually, you know, yesterday I found out that my, you know, sister back at home has da-da-da, or I didn't get the score I really wanted on my my test last week, so I'm probably gonna, you know, miss the window for promotion this year. Oh, that sucks. Let's talk about it. It's related to the second one. They have too much powerful words, but simply asking, "How are you today?" and then waiting for an answer is one of the most simple and most powerful interactive things. And sometimes we forget the power we have as supervisors, as leaders, for those little micro interactions, those just basic human exchanges. And they matter. And it's related to a couple of the other ones on here. But to my point to you about you're the most important leadership level, I'll tell you a related story that's to this one. As a wing commander, I would do Airman Leadership School graduations. Quarterly, or actually every other month, however long, every class, right? And we would have a big fancy, not dining out, but a best dressed dinner at the club. And there'd be a couple hundred people in round tables all around. And I would tell these young airmen who were about to become NCOs, right? They graduated Airman Leadership School and they were about to become a supervisor officially for the first time. I would tell them, you are the most important leadership level, most important supervisor level. Just the way a lieutenant is for their flight of 5, 10, 20, maybe 50 people. That NCO with her team, his team, 5, 10, 15, 20, is the most important person. And I say, if you don't believe me, check this out. I say, everybody in this room, because there's moms and dads and retired chiefs and colonels, everybody in this room who's got more than 20 years in our Air Force, raise your hand if you remember the name of your first wing commander. How many hands do you think go up? You don't, do you? No. I don't remember the name of my first wing commander. My first wing commander was probably some old guy in another state because wings were scattered around. Then I say, raise your hands if you remember the name of your first supervisor. How many hands do you think go up? Yeah, but you remember.
Yes, sir.
Every hand goes up. 20 years later, 15 different assignments, everybody remembers their name of their first supervisor. Nobody remembers the name of their first wing commander. If that doesn't tell you who the important leadership level is, I don't know what does. So, don't forget it. The power you have as a lieutenant, as a flight commander, as a lieutenant who's leading NCOs who are leading teams of airmen, they hang on every word. That kind act, that thank you, that hey, how are you doing? That could be the thing that makes their day that day. And we have no idea what's going on in their lives. Everybody's got stuff going on in their lives. Everybody puts on a good face. But we all got stuff going on. And you are going to have the opportunity to affect those folks in a way that Colonel Havard and I don't get to anymore. That's okay. We had our time. All right, that's that one. Yeah.
So I have a follow-up to the mortars and marriage question.
Yeah.
Obviously, there's a lot of innovation that went into that system. how do you funnel innovation in the right direction if there's, obviously, like, you could have innovated in a different way. How do you funnel that as a leader correctly?
Great question. And you don't know necessarily the outcome. You have a goal and an end state in mind. Please don't get me wrong. The CRAM is an amazing system. It's deployed on ships as a point defense weapon. It's incredibly capable. It's good. My message there is that it is a technological solution which should be part, but it's not the only solution. And so when I talk about encouraging innovation, it needs to be, there's innovation, and then there's like graduate level innovation, which is like, let's think on a completely different plane. Let's think about alternate universes kind of stuff, right? I mean, so you can innovate technically and develop programs for 5th gen stealth, hypersonics, standoff weapons, loyal wingmen, all these very important things that we're doing. Those are also innovations and need to happen. But as a leader, you've got to be able to go, all right, that's important, but what are we not thinking about? And actually, that's related. It's actually a beautiful lead into my Evil Genius meeting one here. As a squadron commander, 315th Network Warfare Squadron, Fort Meade, Maryland, 10 years ago, we carved out time every week for what we called Evil Genius meetings. Google does the same thing, and a lot of Silicon Valley companies, innovative companies, do the same thing. They carve out, they say 20% of your time is you work on whatever you want to work on. We did it before Google did it, and it was cool. We called them Evil Genius meetings. I had a bunch of interactive operators, the Air Force's hackers, right? So IONs and EAs, interactive operators and exploitation analysts. These are the airmen that we send 1B4s, 17Xs, enlisted and officer career fields, cyber operators. And we send them to crazy levels of schooling. Give them a couple $1 million worth of education to make them some of the most dangerous people in America on a keyboard. We let them do things that on the outside would be very, very illegal. But because they're doing it for us, it's Title 10 combat operations. It's pretty awesome. And what we would do is we said, all right, we got all the missions we're doing, but on a Friday afternoon, we're shutting down operations over here, we're gonna lock you in a room, and you're just gonna have unstructured time to think like evil geniuses. If you could get away with anything, I have to be careful how I say this, because everything we did was legal in the eyes of the JAG, but if you were unconstrained by law, policy, or anything else, just thinking evil thoughts about how to screw with, pick your adversary, what would you come up with? What would you do? How could you do it? And so those evil genius meetings ended up generating some of those amazing innovations. Like, yeah, camera. What if we did this? Oh, geez, that would require buying that and then doing that, and what? We can't do that from here. But what if we? Oh yeah, but what if we did it? And those kind of just freewheeling, unstructured, evil genius ideas turned into some of the coolest innovations that we still do today. And so I guess the long-winded answer to your very good short question is, there's got to be some time for truly unconstrained thinking. But when it comes to programmatics and throwing hard cash at it, it begins to get real, and you got to start very quickly sticking into law, policy, and dealing with our acquisition rules, etc. Not to say that it can't be done, but you kind of balance it both. Terrible answer, I'm sorry. You had your hand up.
Sir, can you talk about genes to Czechoslovakia?
Yeah, sure. This is where I feel old when I talk to people about this one. A lot of folks don't know, I'm actually, English is a second language. My mother spoke only Czech in the home. She was born in 1965 in what was then communist-controlled Czechoslovakia. She was born in 1950. She escaped in 1965, crashed the border and ended up in a refugee camp in Italy, came to the United States. The rest is history. But in the height of the Cold War, in the 1970s, when I was growing up, it was still the Iron Curtain, right? It was still good America, bad Soviet Union. Russia's bad again, but bad Soviet Union. big Iron Curtain, everything about America was good, everything over there was bad. And as a young boy, I remember actually having the opportunity, I traveled back to what was then communist-controlled Czechoslovakia still, because my mother, once she got her magic blue American passport, she felt emboldened to be able to go back. And so we did go back, and we had a lot of family who still lived there. And then when we came back to the States, she would send care packages. We didn't have a lot of money growing up. I was all hand-me-down clothes for my brothers and sisters and I, but whenever we outgrew something and it was cool American clothes, i.e. blue jeans, they'd go in cardboard boxes, get wrapped up, and they would get shipped back over there. And I was like, why are we doing that? This is like handed down from me to my brother, to my sister, all right? Why are we sending ratty old jeans? Because jeans were unattainable. Jeans represented everything that was amazing about America and the West, right? And so that was when I realized, whoa, and there are different worlds. And something as simple as sending jeans to family members over there, it was both risky, because they would be like followed around going, how'd you get those jeans? But it was really, really cool for them. The message there is, there are reasons we all do things. You need to have your story. At some point you will develop it. But mine is that. It is, at a very young age, I recognized the amazingness that is the opportunities we have in this country. And for all our self-flagellation about how broken we are, and we are imperfect, don't get me wrong. We've got challenges. It is by no means a perfect society, a perfect structure, a perfect government. But man, oh man, when you get out there and you see what's going on in the rest of the world, it puts it into perspective. Nobody is putting their children in the trunks of cars and dodging bullets to get out of here to go somewhere else. No one sits here begging for people who have escaped from here to send things back to us here. And until that happens, nobody can tell me that we still don't have it about right. Yeah, we got problems, we got challenges, but nothing like it is in the rest of the world. So it's one of my origin stories, why I do what I do, why I'm still doing this after 28 plus years. Number one, it's freaking fun. It really is. But there's a reason we do this, the reason we wear this uniform. And it's got to be about being something bigger than ourselves, something, an idea, something we stand for. And that became real crystal clear to me at about the age of 12. So that's the jeans to Czechoslovakia story. That quarter, then we'll go to you.
So you can touch on the volleyball is the only thing that you can
Yeah, this one's intense. Again, this was a case where I was the wing commander, and we had a squadron, a wing sports day, and it was a volleyball tournament, but we actually had kind of an ongoing volleyball league in the wing. And so I was there, you know, standard wing commander act, throwing out the ceremonial first volleyball, and you know, played a couple things. And I was standing around doing what wing commanders do, wandering around just talking to airmen. And this airman came up to me and said, "Hey, sir, thanks for doing this. This is really awesome." And I was just chatting him up, and he casually said, "You know, sir, volleyball is the only thing that keeps me going." And back to my, "How you doing?" Right? I said, "What do you mean?" "Volleyball is the only thing that keeps you going." And I pressed a little bit, I dug. And this kid opened up. I mean, no kidding. He said, and he laid out this huge list of, you know, my boss is doing this and that. Work is ridiculously stressful, and he opened up about his home situation and everything else. To the point where he literally told me that if it wasn't for the volleyball team, the squadron volleyball team that he played on, that he had to be there on Wednesday and Friday evenings for this volleyball, he probably would have made some decisions that would have been really, really bad, like ending life decisions. And this is where I said, it rocked me, because again, you know, everybody's got different stories. I am incredibly fortunate. I got an amazing wife, a happy home life, a half-decent kid. I did not I was not in that circle of hanging on by a thread. This young airman was hanging on by a thread. And it was volleyball. Not a rousing speech by his wing commander, not a mentoring session by his squadron commander. It was his volleyball team. Work was wholly unsatisfying. And it rocked me. I was like, geez, wow. If that's the case, I need to start, rolling up my sleeves. Let's figure out what's going on at work, what's going on at home. How many more are like this? How many people are on this volleyball team that are like, one bad day away from me having to go and ring the doorbell in some parent's house in the middle of the night, kind of situation. And I think I put that one under, where's the volleyball one? I put it under, recognize your power. It's, no, is it? No, where did the volleyball go? I missed it.
Blind spots.
Blind spots, yeah, blind spots. Just because I got it good, just because you got it good, doesn't mean you got it good. Just because you look all put together and you got great grades and you rocked your PT test, doesn't mean that you don't have some crazy stuff going on at home. Just because you are falling apart grade-wise doesn't mean that you don't have everything else sorted out. The whole point is we're all a bunch of complete or incomplete packages. And as a leader, I'm on this camp of kind of being a little bit of an intrusive leader. But you got to get to know your folks, and you got to begin to pull the threads to understand what's going on. Not to be overly intrusive, but to begin to synthesize, so that you can find out if, in fact, it's volleyball that's the only thing that's keeping somebody going. Because then you got some work to do. Not that we're clinical social workers, but you know the resources. You will learn the resources to be able to get people help. And you as a leader will be able to affect the things in the work environment, in the mission environment, that can begin to nibble away at some of the things that make volleyball the only thing that keeps people going. All right, that one's depressing. Let's pick it up.
Oh, no, sir, how did you respond to that question? Like, how did, when someone opens up that much to you and you're like, take it all in, how do you properly
That's a great question.
leave that sentence?
So, it was, earlier on, it was really, really hard. It was awkward. The first few times, I remember, back stoop at Moody Air Force Base as a young captain, about to be a major in Wing IN, a young airman bawling her eyes out because her boyfriend broke up at home with her. I didn't know what the hell to say. That was awkward. It was weird. Now, because I've done enough of these things and I've had some time and experience in my belt, I'm just honest. I just get right at it. I start asking questions. And, to the point of in a conversation like that, it very quickly went, are you thinking about harming yourself or others? You gotta ask a point blank question. Are you thinking about hurting yourself? Because if so, come with me. Let's go talk to the chaplain right now. Let's leave the volleyball court. Let's go talk to the chaplain. Let's go find the SAR. Let's go find this resource person, that resource person. You will have access to all of those. You will learn all those things. It gets easier with time. I'm not here to tell you that there is a template, a checklist, or a book. It's hard. And I screwed up a bunch of them. And I'm going to screw up a bunch more, I'm sure, before I take the uniform off. All people need to know, though, is that you're honest and genuine and that you care. And if it's imperfect, if your delivery is not great, if if you stumble on how to get people resources, it's not nearly as important or as significant as if you had simply gone, ooh, that's too much, man, that's good on you, I'm not going to touch that one. That's not the right answer. You'll muddle through the rest of it. I did. It's a good question. Sir?
So could you go through, I've never heard a colonel say, I'm sorry before?
Sure. This one was back to the chaos, back to the LUD. We screwed up. We, as a leadership team, we had, there was quarterly and annual awards that happen right all the time, even in a deployed location like that. And we had submitted a bunch of people for awards. And it's been a while, so I can't remember the exact details, but what had happened was that an airman who deserved recognition, who we had built the package for some administrative reason, the package didn't go through. And the airman did not get a quarterly award and someone else did. The airman had no idea that the package had not gone all the way through and hadn't been submitted. And it would have been easy to be like, all right, well. But I and my team, because this was a team thing, I said, no, we're going to go talk to this happened in the Target's shop, to the Target's team, and I'm going to tell them what happened. They're like, what's it going to help? I said, I think it's important. So I went, and it wasn't actually me. It was someone on my team, you know, the front office leadership team. But I owned it. So what are they going to do? They're not paying me anymore? I was getting paid plenty. They're going to pay me. So I went, I took ownership, and I said, hey, Airman so-and-so, here's the deal. You should have been our nominee. I screwed it up. I didn't get the package in time, or I can't remember what it was. Something happened. I owned it, and I told him, hey, listen, I'm sorry. We screwed this one up for you. And he's like, oh, okay, thanks, yeah. And then later, he came back, and the supervisor came back and everything. And it wasn't the fact that we had screwed up, or even the fact that an apology happened. It was the apology to this airman came from a colonel. And he's like, I had never heard a colonel say I'm sorry before. And I was like, wow, really? That's kind of profound. And why? Because those airmen, saw us at a completely different level. There's so many layers, right? And simple story is it added a layer of humanity to this, that there's infallibility. We're all humans, and there's infallibility all the way up. And someone who can own that gained a degree of now trust with that individual. Like, whoa, if they are willing to admit to and apologize for something that was not a huge thing, it probably means that they're going to be pretty transparent and trustworthy, you know, in the future. So don't let your ego get ahead or prevent you from showing a little humility. And the further along you go, the more important it is that people see humility. A lot of the great leaders that we see, that we put up on pedestals, are the ones who fall the hardest, and you see it right at the very highest levels of government. These are people who've begun to believe their own myth. They begin to think that they can do no wrong because they've got teams of people around them telling them that they're the best, the funniest, the smartest, they can do no wrong. And that's when they get into trouble. So practice humility. Practice saying, I'm sorry. Find something that you can apologize for. It's amazing the power of an apology. Not as powerful as the two most powerful words in the English language, but I'm sorry, it's pretty darn good.
What are they?
The two? What do you think they are? Anybody have any idea what the two most powerful words in the English language, in my mind, are?
Thank you.
You got it. You nailed it. Thank you. How much does it cost to tell somebody thank you? Free. Totally free. We spend a lot of time writing up decorations, presenting awards, holding promotion ceremonies, giving gifts. But I would offer that the two most powerful words in the English language, so easy to say and not said enough. And it matters when it comes from a PAS, or a detachment commander. It matters when it comes from a wing commander. But it matters most when it comes from a first-line supervisor. Because guess what? The people who are out there on the flight line, in the trenches, in the front offices, in the back offices, they're working for you. They're working for somebody. All they want to know is that what they're doing matters and that they're doing it right. And it can be as simple as telling somebody, hey, thanks. Thanks for what you just did. I saw that. It was pretty cool. Thank you for picking up that piece of paper. Nobody else saw it, but I saw you do it. That's pretty cool. Thank you. Doesn't cost anything. No paperwork involved. No staff processes. And that could be the thing that makes that person's day. And as we just discussed with volleyball and some of the other things, not everybody's days are going great. And that may be the day that that person was on the edge. And that thank you, that moment, that quick little human interaction was enough to go, oh, wow, I didn't know she knew my name. I didn't know she knew I existed, and she just thanked me for something that I didn't think she saw. Whoa. And that made it a good day. And maybe that day made it a good week. And that was the week they were going to decide whether to re-enlist or not. You don't know. You don't know if you caused that person to choose to stay or go, to go do something else, to stay or go from this planet. You don't know, and you won't. But if you say thank you, have a kind interaction, or not so kind interaction, you don't say sir enough, but give somebody feedback and have it. You may have made that person make a decision, the results of which you may never know, but it's kind of cool going home at night thinking that you might have. So say thank you. Simple as that. Two most powerful words in the English language. I believe it. How are we doing on time? Am I boring y'all? Are you getting sleepy, getting hot? We can go as long as y'all want.
PMT time is now over. If you have to leave, you're free to go, but we'll do another 30 minutes, 45 minutes of Q&A if you'd like to stay. But PMT time is now over.
You're officially off the hook, but I don't have anywhere else to be, so you're stuck.
So
Yeah, then
your 3 items on your desktop passed on. I think everybody had a chance to see them.
Yeah.
Can we go back to them and tell us
yeah, let's do it. Let's do the 3 items. Where are they?
Sir, that was my question too. So.
Okay, you got it. Good. 2 for 1. All right, this is actually a good way to end it. We'll let everybody clear out who needs to go. I know everybody's got stuff going on. These are 3 items that I keep on my desk in every assignment I've had, and they are my reminders. They're reminders of this business of ours, this profession of ours. Because it is a profession, it's a calling, it's an advocacy, right? Let's start with this one. Any ideas of what this might be? Yeah.
I think that's a piece of aluminum.
It is a piece of aluminum. Anybody? A little more? Yeah.
Piece of shrapnel that got blown off, maybe armored vehicle or something like that.
Closer, but not shrapnel off of an armored vehicle. Going with the aluminum theme. It is aluminum.
Sir, spacecraft part?
No, but close. All right. It is a piece of the first B-1A bomber that crashed at Edwards Air Force Base when Rebecca and I were young lieutenant's wife. She was a flight test engineer at the Air Force Flight Test Center, and I was an intel officer. That was our first assignment after leaving here. And we had a pair of dirt bikes, Honda XR200 that I bought off the Lemon lot, that she got on once and promptly stole, so I had to go buy another one. So I had 200. So we would spend our afternoons after work cruising around the Mojave Desert on our dirt bikes. And we would stumble across really cool things out in the desert. Edwards Air Force Base is the home of the Air Force Flight Test. There's a lot of history there, a lot of crash sites. And this was just one piece of what is still out there, lots of pieces of what was once molten aluminum that has obviously since solidified, from the first B-1A that crashed, killing the flight test engineer and test pilot. And this is just one little piece that I scrounged up. There's a much larger piece with a plaque, etc., at the bar at Edwards that a bunch of lieutenants built, by the way. If you ever go to Edwards, it's still there. It's a rebuilt Poncho's bar. Anyway, this is my reminder that this is a violent business of ours. This is dangerous work. This isn't just trudging to a 9-to-5 office every day. We end up killing people and breaking things in peacetime so that we don't have to in war. Test is a dangerous business. Development is a dangerous business. If you get assigned to Air Force Material Command, don't think that you are not at the pointy edge. If you're an engineer, if you are an acquisitions person, you are still a huge part of this very violent business of ours. And this is my reminder that we sweat and we bleed in testing and in training and development before we even get to the point of actual conflict. And it's what makes us a little different than your non-military job. Okay, how about this one? This one is hard. Nobody's ever got this. And I've been doing this for years. Nobody's ever got this. Any ideas? Yes?
Is that some sort of piston?
It's not a piston. That's a good guess. Yeah.
Is it some sort of like actuator, maybe from a bomb or something?
it has an actuating function, not a bomb. But who are all the engineers here? Huh? Any engineers? All right. And you're talking to a poli-sci major, right? So, this is one half of a breakaway bolt. There's another piece on like this that sits right here. What you see at this here is about 80,000 pounds of shear pulling strength, pulling this steel, this hardened steel apart. This is one half of that bolt. Y'all have seen the first Top Gun or any movies, right, with the shooter person. One of their jobs, other than doing the whole cool shooter thing and making the jet go, is to take one of these and stick it into the linkage between the catapult, then steam, now electromagnetic mostly, and the nose wheel of whatever aircraft they're launching. And it is the combined power of the aircraft and afterburner, or a max power type plane, and the steam catapult that shears this pin and launches that aircraft. And there are buckets of these sitting on the deck of flight ops of every aircraft carrier floating around the world. And this I got as a, you'd think I got it out of my story of when I was out there with General Goldfein on the aircraft carrier, but I got this much earlier as a young lieutenant at Edwards Air Force Base. I told you, there's amazing opportunities at Air Force, folks. As a second lieutenant, Edwards Air Force Base, at a flight test center working for a civilian, I was in one of those jobs that you're like, oh crap, you get the drop and you're like, I wanted to go to a fighter squadron. Oh, I wanted to go to the coolest job in the world. Because I got to deploy all over the place. I got to do things from there that I never would have got to anywhere else. One of them was spending 2 weeks out on the USS Nimitz out in the Pacific as an augmenter to the Carrier Intel Center, where we got to participate in flight operations. And one of the deck crew tossed me one of these as a memento, because there's buckets for them. Every time we launch an airplane, anywhere in the world off the deck of an aircraft carrier, we are breaking stuff. We are shearing 40 to 80,000 pounds tensile strength steel bolts. Every time. And this is my reminder, again, of the violent nature of this business of ours. If any of you think that this isn't dangerous, violent business, you're wrong. It is. At the end of the day, when all the other elements of power fail, diplomatic, informational, economic, the US government has all these levers of power to pull. When all the others fail, that military lever of power is pulled, and our job is to kill people and break things. Nobody wants to do that, but it's our business. And this is my reminder that even before we go into conflict, as part of the dying diplomatic, informational, military, economic, we are floating around the world, honking the big American superpower horn, honk, honk, floating aircraft carriers, deploying bomber task forces, putting thousands of people at air bases to influence the world in the way that we want it to be influenced. I don't apologize for that. Stay critical. Part of it is really violent. And this is my reminder that in peace, to prevent war, we're out there breaking stuff. Okay, last one. Anybody?
Chunk of slate, looks like.
It is a chunk of slate. You guys are good. You must be in college or something. It is a chunk of slate. Any idea what it might be from? That gets tougher. This is a piece of slate shingle from the Pentagon. If you knew it, why didn't you say it? Take it out there, man. Be bold. I knew it. You're absolutely back. I knew it.
You gotta shave your mustache for that one.
Wow. Yeah, March is over. What's going on? So this is, in fact, a piece of slate shingle from the roof of the Pentagon that I picked up, still warm, on September 12th, 2001. I was a captain assigned to the Pentagon at the time. I was a young Air Force intern. They had this thing called the intern program where as a young captain you can go and spend a year basically doing rotations around. You didn't have a real job. You basically got a peek behind the curtain, as it were, doing rotations in the Office of Secretary of Defense and the Office of the Secretary of the Air Force and Joint Staff. And we were there on 9/11. Building got hit, we evacuated. I walked home 12 miles that day because it was gridlocked, cell phones weren't working, public transportation was down, and the streets were gridlocked. So I walked home. The next day, came back to work. What else is there to do? Went back into the Pentagon, as did almost everybody else. And they put us to work doing cleanup. Because again, we were interns, we didn't have real jobs. And so we were up on the roof, separating good tiles from bad, because even then, less than 24 hours after that building was hit, we knew we were gonna rebuild it. And this stuff ain't cheap, folks. You know, doing a slate roof like here in College Heights, nice fancy neighborhood over here, if you wanna redo a slate roof, you're talking about $80,000, $100,000 just for a roof. Back in 1946, money was no object. When they built that Pentagon, they slate roofed the whole thing. And that's a lot of roof. And so we separated good tiles from bad. The concrete was still hot. It still smelled. Smoke was still rising, but we were cleaning up. And this I took and kept with me because it's my reminder that even after we sweat and bleed in testing and training and development to make sure we've got the most powerful military in the world, and even after we're floating around the oceans, breaking steel and launching jets and waving the big American flag, sometimes the enemy, always the enemy, gets a vote, and sometimes they choose to take the fight to us. And so we've got to be ready. And it is that eternal vigilance that your fellow citizens expect of those of us in uniform. And I hope to God we don't have to. I hope none of you have to. But we all have to be ready to take on the next adversary, to deter the next adversary, so they don't get the opportunity to visit violence on us here at home. So those are the three pieces on my desk. That's my reminders that this is a pretty violent business. And you ought to be conflicted. No one should want to go to war. No one should want to have to do this stuff. But as you join the Air Force, you will be one of about 340,000 airmen on active duty. That's 1/10 of 1% of the population, right? So we've got about 340, 350 million citizens. So you'll represent 1/10 of 1% of those who've chosen to live this kind of life, to accept the risks of what it means to visit violence on the nation's behalf, on other people. And you gotta be good with that. And I don't know, we don't always talk about that part of this, but those things on my desk always remind me of that.